Hello and welcome to a new edition of What's New with K9sAlpha. This is our first drop, of that particular release. Again, this is going to be a licensed release, so we are going to offer two type of licenses, namely Power One and Power Two, P1 or P2. P1 is more geared toward light usage of a Kubernetes cluster versus P2 is more for power users and enterprise users. Right? You can read more about the details in this new page, new site here, K9sAlpha.io, and there is information here about the GitHub repository. So this is where I would expect you to file issues and PRs against K9sAlpha, so we can track it separate from K9s. Also, I've redone the documentation, try to make things a little bit clearer. Now, I still owe you quite a bit there. There's still some stuff that needs to be cleaned up, and sections that need to come in. Again, if you're so inclined, I will appreciate some help here, as well as with the installers. They're pretty rough right now. We just offering a very standard installer based on the release pages. If you want to offer, some, installer for like Chocolatey and, other, Linux distros, I'd be more than happy to welcome PRs against that. Okay, so this is kind of the high level here of this site. And if we now look at, the actual K9s release, this is going to be RC0, I hope. I think I've been trying to record this video for like, I don't know, it's going to be the 50th take. Every time I run it, I had some issues I had to go back and fix. Never got to complete it. So hopefully this is going to be good enough. So we'll see. All right, so let's take a look here. First, let's look at the version. So this is the RC0. And as well, let's look at info. And this is going to be a little bit of a departure here from what we had with K9s. So first off, I'll show you the license. Licenses are going to be yearly based. And also you can see the difference here, but where we actually storing the configuration and the artifacts managed by K9. So there was a few issues related, and they were right on point. K9s, yes, gonna, yet another dot file, cluttering my home repository, my home directory. So we changed that. We're now using the XDG specification to store K9 specific artifacts. So here, I'll show you what I have here local. Again, you don't have to set those environment variables. They will default to sensible defaults based on the platform you're using. However, in this case, for the demo, I switched over to a different config, and these are going to be, like the config directory is where the K9's general configuration as well as clusters or context configurations are going to live. The artifacts, things like the benchmark results, your screen dumps, your logs, all of those are going to obey, those environment variables, whether they are set or not, therefore, going to the defaults accordingly. Now, the other thing that's different is this guy here. So if I look at just the configuration, top level configuration for K9s, you see we have the config.yaml, again, business as usual here, your typical suspect, aliases, hotkeys, plugins, views, all of those are still, within that directory. The departure here is now we're introducing a new directory called context, and this is going to be, on per connection on the kubeconfig with whichever context you're connecting to with K9s. This guy themselves will have their own configuration. So these are refinement over the general configuration at the context level. So now you have the ability to, instead of having a wild read-only flag that can apply to K9s either on the CLI argument or in the general config, I cannot say, hey, when I connect to cluster A, I want the read-only mode to be on. However, on cluster B, I don't want the read-only mode to be on, right? So this gives you more granularity in terms of the feature gates that you can enable when you're connecting from one cluster to another, or the readability, or the powers that you have on that specific cluster. Again, you can see here benchmarks. If you have customization with benchmarks, they're going to be cluster or context specific. Scales and workload, I will cover those in a second. And as well, the skills, you can change the look and feel as you switch over to different clusters, right? So this is going to be a little bit of a difference here in terms of configuration and where they actually live. All right, so if I kick in, let's put debug mode just in case I get some issues, God forbid. All right, so if I, again, this is, the UI is pretty much the same, just a different logo. We do specify here, show you the power level for your license as well as the expiration, so you can track this. We'll do more around that, reminder, your license is going to expire, blah, 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 but didn't get around to do that yet. So if I switch over to my default namespace here, again, config map, secrets, all of those, are still there. Deployments, hotkeys, help, all of it is the same. As far as navigation, not much has changed here. Now, you may notice, some clusters you walk in and you see stuff like that. So yes, this guy has a cron job running every 5 minutes. And there's, a bunch of accumulation of jobs here. So if you're working with people that may not have, limit sets on those jobs, you may, end up having, I think by default is 10 jobs accumulated or something like that. I forgot the default now, but this can clutter, your views. So one of the things to eliminate clutter is a new shortcut called sanitize, for Z for sanitize. And this is going to basically go look at your pods. Anything that is in completed or error state will be deleted. So if they're in error state, they'll be restarted. If they're completed, they'll be gone. So again here, forgive the syntactically incorrect sentence. However, I just wanted to make sure you paid attention so you know what you're doing here. So if I type a confirmation here, this will go out and take out anything that is in completed state in that particular scenario, so I can clean up and focus only on the parts that do matter at this stage. Okay, so this is one of those options here. Now the other thing that we have, and this is again regular deletion here with Control D. You can basically delete a pod, right? This cluster here is read-only set to false, so I can totally delete a pod if I want to. Again, it's a managed pod, so it's going to come back around. No deal in this case. However, if I switch over to a different context, this guy, we'll see a different behavior. So again, same operation, Control D on this pod. Now you notice a different dialog that asks you for a confirmation. So this was voiced, I think Andrew had mentioned that in the issues with K9s. I think he blown away like a namespace or something. Again, the dialog doesn't save you really, right? So here you wanted to have a little bit more of Andrew or Fernand, pay attention here. Do you really want to do this, right? So here what I have to do is type in the name of the resource. I think if you have multiple selections, it will actually ask you to type in the first one or something like that, right? So in this case here, if I type this guy and let's say I screwed it up and I try to delete, nothing happens, right? So now if I go back here and set it to the right thing and now delete it, now it will actually delete the resource. Okay, this dialog applies to any resources now. And the way this is surfaced, the way we get this extra confirm here is a new flag that is set on the configuration and is called idiot light. So idiot light has two states, true or false. If you have the idiot light on, it will ask you to confirmation. Idiot light off, it will not ask you to confirmation. It'll be business as usual with your delete dialog. Okay, so let me go back to the old cluster. All right, so now we'll talk about probably one of the biggest feature and most headachy feature and complex to implement, which is a feature here that I call workloads, right? So WK or WKS, or you can type in workload as well. So this guy basically allows you to define the notion of a workload, which is using the Kubernetes selection mechanism, which is the label-based queries, and a workload is really a name and a set of labels, right? So this allows you to group together things that are part of your cluster that achieve a particular feature of the cluster. Some application, a collection of web services, a database backend, and whatever that happens to represent your cluster. It doesn't have to be necessarily separated on a different namespace. It can be something that's spread across multiple namespaces, but do have a set of labels that identify what those guys are working and offering to the cluster. Okay, so in this case I've got two, Fred and Blee, and here we have CRUD, so I can edit Blee here and Blee 1 or something like that, and I can edit this guy here. And likewise, I can do this as well here. So let's see, this guy right here. So this guy also will obey the file system. So if this file changes on disk, the view will be reflected. So this is very much in traditional K9s fashion where we have those reactive views. Likewise, I can create a new workload. Let's say Papi, cool, Papi. And as far as manifest, I'll talk about this in a second. You don't have to set it to be valid, so you can leave it blank. And this will create this Papi here. So this guy is going to ask me to reload, and here's Papi here. And again, I can change the label to, I don't know, Papi 1 or something, and this guy will be reflected in the view. Okay, so there's nothing matching there, not a deal. All right, so if we look here, what do we have? Well, okay, so first, when you press enter, it's going to list all the resources that are affiliated that match this label. So in this case, I've got PVCs, I've got config maps, pods, services, all of those, right? Okay, so this is fine. And likewise here, I've got 5 resources that match. Here they are. Now you notice there's those columns, severe, warn, info, okay. Well, this is Popeye in the back, being repurposed, right, to basically allow you to scan those resources and produce, reports based on that, based on things that we find as part of the scan that may be, wrong about the settings or kind of iffy about the setting of things that you must take care of now, or you could clean up at some point, right? So this gives you a little bit of visibility on best practices around your configurations. In this case, I've got none, right? So all the report pass, I've got 100% score. Everything is peachy right now on the cluster. Okay, so if we go and try to edit one of those, so let's go to sure, this guy. And here, if you notice, I've got an edit functionality. So that means, now I can actually edit the artifact that are used to produce this workload. So this is where the manifest field come in, right? So if it isn't set, I wouldn't have anything to edit. But in this case here, I do have a thing to edit. So if we look here, this is actually a customization. So the manifest can be a file, can be a directory, or can be a customization. Those are the only 3 types we currently supporting. So in this case here, if I edit this config map, and let's say I set this guy to the 1, this view is eventually consistent, so it does take a while to refresh, so be patient here on this view to actually get the latest information. But you can see now this config map, the 1 of the delta flashed, and the delta basically tracks what is on disk versus what is deployed on the cluster, and the difference whether the disk varies or the cluster varies. So in this case, the disk will vary, and if we look at the delta here, which is D, the command here, it shows me that now on this particular label Blee, on disk it says disk the1, on the cluster is set to the, right? So there's a delta, right? So if anybody in your team went in and cowboyed a cluster by going in directly and editing, just as good as going to a production database and deleting records there, right? Don't do that. somebody did carbo it, you will pick up on this and figure out there's now a problem, or you've updated the artifact and now something needs to be redeployed again. Yes, I know there's many tools that are dealing with this kind of stuff, but I think it's kind of interesting still to have that validation with K9s, bundled in, just to give you a little bit more insight of what's going on inside the cluster in case your GitHubs or CI/CD or whatever, somehow didn't do the right thing. You can still pick it up here with K9s, which I think is cool. Okay, so let's do something a little bit different. Let's actually edit again here, and let me do this. So if I edit this config map, and let's say I took off this guy. So let's say I rename one of those properties. I forget which one is used. I think they're all used right now. Let's try this out. Okay, so now this is actually should produce eventually. So now I've got 5 deltas, and if I apply this guy, so we can check it. So this gives me, again, this is the same thing that you get with the dir view in K9s. We can apply those manifests. So this actually went in and applied a customization, which is a little bit more complex to do. But you can see that the config map changed, the stateful set changed as well. Everything else stayed the same. So hopefully here we'll see a difference coming in, which I hope this will happen. If not, I screwed up. No issues. Okay, so maybe this config map was not using those keys. Yeah. Okay, let's try a different one. This was not what I expected. Okay, so let's see here if we get to a straight up directory. Here, if I change this here to this. Okay, so now I've got a delta here on this guy, and if I applied, do we get a delta? Okay, this is better. Okay, so somehow this took a while to figure it out. So now we're getting an update. That's good. Okay, so now we're seeing here there's an issue which is severe on the deployment and an issue as well on the pod as expected, because the deployment is the cookie cutter for the pod, right? So if we look at this, so now there's a new view called radar. So if you hit R here, it will actually show you that Nginx is referencing a missing property on the config map, right? So this now gives you an indication of that situation if the pod, redeployed, but the config map, got updated and the pod was still alive. At that point, you would not have picked up that situation. But now that the pod is restored, now we actually see it, right? So this is a severe situation in this case. And likewise here, if I go to the radar view again, R, you actually will get to see this. Now, these views are also available at the higher level. So on the workload directory, I can press R. This will list all the current issues with any of the resources that match this label. And likewise, D here with the delta will show me all of the differences here with the delta as well. So this guy basically had properties that is v1 that is set on disk but not set on the cluster, meaning this was not applied. And over here, I've got a minus, which is basically it exists on the cluster but does not exist on disk for the data blee here, right? So that's the difference here, the deltas here. Okay, so if now we go into this detail here, so if I look at the radar report here, you'll see, the config map is different. That's fine. And then, we do see blee1 doesn't appear to be in use. Okay, so these are tied to codes, right? So typically the code name is going to be related to the resource the code is reported on. In this case, CM code. So now if I go in here and I edited that scans file, this allows me to set exclusions based on those scans, right? So here, for example, things like, if you are in Istio cluster, you don't have any control over the sidecars, right? So istio init, istio proxy, stuff like that. It's not worth to put that in your scans because you can't really control those. However, I can control the codes. So in this case here, if I said, hopefully this works, CM03, right? So no matter what resource grows this guy, if there's a CM03, go ahead and exclude it from the scan. So hopefully if I just screw up, and I hope this works, we should see this eventually change. Yes. All right, so this now is excluded, and let me do another one for good measure here. Let's try this guy, CM02. And if all goes well, this guy will go as well. So the 2 warnings should now be gone. Again, be patient here. This is about a 5-second tick, I think. All right. So this is one thing, right? But in this case, let's say I do care about these, and let's say I want to see those back again. Now you can also exclude stuff at the resource level. So this is a multiple level. So this is the JVR, right? GVR, so group version resource, which is the plural mode of the resource group name. Excuse me. And then here in this case, let's say I wanted to look at config maps. So config maps plural, right? So here, if I just did this, I will take out any config maps report. So I don't care about config maps. I don't care what state they are. That's okay, right? Or you can further specify this. So now you go with the namespace / the name of the config map, which I think what was that guy called? That? I forgot. I think it was Nginx. And let's see if that's true. Right, so now that guy should not report. I'm guessing he won't. And now you can actually refine here, now saying, don't exclude that guy entirely, exclude just certain codes. So I can do codes CM03. So report any other codes. However, if it's CM03, just exclude that guy. So hopefully, if I just screw up, yes, this is working. Very cool. So you can see it didn't exclude config map completely. It just said, okay, if you see CM02, we'll show that one, but I can exclude CM03. So again, be careful with this because you can totally, miss issues. So I highly recommend running it wide open once in a while just to make sure there's no new thing that showed up. But again, for certain things like that are outside your control, you're using like CRDs or what have you that goes in and decorate your manifest, you won't have any control over this for the scans, so you might as well just exclude those off the bat. Okay, so this is what we got here going on. Again, this is very similar to the Popeye, spinach. If you're familiar with Popeye, that was very much in that same spirit. Okay, so this is pretty much all I wanted to show you guys. Again, this is new. I think there's some issues still there that needs to be flashed, but I think in the majority of ways it works correctly. Again, this is still limited. I don't scan every single resources on the cluster right now. I think we scanning like 20 different resources, your usual suspects, sequence, config maps, deployments, stateful set, pretty much everything you get out of kubectl, get all, plus RBAC, plus person volume claim, and all that stuff. So we'll add more. I'll have to add more scans as well and tune the scans to be even, add more features to those scans. So these are things that are going to be coming here, when we're stabilizing or while we're stabilizing alpha. So you expect to have, a little bit more richness here when it comes to the scans as well. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. We didn't bomb too badly. I thank you for listening to me and hanging out with me as well. I thank you for your support and your enthusiasm regarding K9s. I hope you find this useful and cool, or at least entertaining. And we'll catch up with you guys on the next drop. And also, if you have Again, this is not my get rich quick scheme at all. So, if you have issues with the license pricing, or you're working for a nonprofit education or what have you, or just can't afford it, just ping me. I'll work with you and make it happen. So, again, thank you for listening. Have a great weekend, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Have a good day. Bye, guys.